I thought we agreed to put that jungle business behind us. It was mating season. How could I have known she was your sister? How long have you two been standing there?
Too long.
I agree, Clank. I agree. Hello and welcome back to the Ratchet & Clank Marathon. Now last time, we checked out Ratchet & Clank Going Commando, and man, what a fantastic adventure this was. So after how well this game was received, expectations were high for what Insomiac had next. Well, about a year later, we were given Ratchet & Clank 3, Up Your Arsenal. It saddens me. It saddens me we will never get a video game with this good of a title ever again. It certainly was a different time back then. But back on topic, the game would be the first to introduce a multiplayer mechanic. It had both local and online multiplayer, with the focus clearly being on the online. However, unlike the movie would lead you to believe, the servers for the PS2 version are now offline and can't be accessed anymore. And not many people are on the PS3 version of the game either. It wasn't much to begin with. It was just a standard siege, capture the flag, or deathmatch mode that honestly got boring after a while. So for this review, I'm going to be sticking strictly to the single player stuff for it. And the trilogy port, it basically has all the same issues that Going Commando did. Yes, including the floating helmet again. I know I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but it's staring at me in every single cutscene. How do you not ignore it? Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's ready your arsenal for this one. Oh, come on, I was obligated to make the joke at some point in this review, alright? So our story begins with Ratchet and Clank relaxing in their new suite in the Bogon Galaxy, when they see two things. One, an episode of Clank's new TV show, Secret Agent Clank. This is actually important, by the way. And that the Florana Galaxy is being attacked by a race known as the Tyrannoids, led by a robotic mad scientist known as Dr. Nefarious. And they just happen to be attacking Veldin, Ratchet's home planet. Seeing this, the two make their way back home and stop the attack. They meet up with the Galactic Rangers, who just cower away the entire time. Trust me, I'll get back on that later. And they cease the attack for the time being. The president of the galaxy says that there's one man who's ever defeated Nefarious, who ends up being Captain Quark. And unfortunately for Ratchet, Quark is put in charge of the Galactic Rangers, who I guess Ratchet is just now a part of? I guess? Yeah. And he assembles the Q-Force. Yes, that's what it's called. To stop Nefarious. And that's actually about it. I mean, overall, it's an okay story. It's very by the books and plays it rather safe, but I just don't find this plot as engaging as the other two games. 2 in particular, which had an intricate plot that was both mysterious and interesting. Here, not much happens throughout the game, and at the end of the day, the real meat of the story is the redemption of Captain Quark, who after Ratchet and Clank became heroes, let's just say his life has been going pretty downhill. So the real purpose of the plot is Quark getting back on his feet, because everything else is pretty one note, and not gonna lie, I wish there was more meat to this, but it's rather dry. The presentation at first glance is very similar to that of Going Commando, and for the most part it is. The character models are on the same level of polish, and the voice work is still great. The music as a whole I'm not as fond of as in 2, but the tracks that are good are really good, like the new arena theme, and in particular, the boss fight against Courtney Gears, who, yeah, that's an actual character by the way. It's my favorite theme of the entire franchise. It's so good. But sadly, I do think the presentation as a whole is a step back from what we had previously. Environments don't stand out as much as they did in 2, and they all blend together for me. And the choice of colors don't match as well and make everything feel really blurry and unclear. The writing as a whole is very hit or miss, and the big reason is that most of the focus is on your team, which consists of Helga, Skid, Big Al, Scrunch the Monkey, and new love interest Sasha. Since you're always with these guys, you don't really interact with many characters on different planets, and most of these characters in the past were just one-note characters, and that doesn't change much here. you don't have as much variety in the jokes either, and they run their course fast. Though what saves the writing for me is Nefarious and his butler Lawrence. These guys are fantastic! They have such great banter with one another, with Nefarious being completely over the top, and Lawrence being so passive-aggressive at everything Nefarious does. And of course, the best joke of the entire game. Every time Nefarious gets too angry, his body shuts off and plays a part of a romantic audio soap opera.
That's what makes it so good, Janice. Feel it. My heart is pounding like an anvil.
Oh, this is the best part of my day.
It's too good. So while it's good for PS2 standards, I can't help but feel like this is a backward step from what we had in Going Commando. But we haven't been over the gameplay yet, so let's go check that out. On the surface, the gameplay is pretty similar to what we had in Going Commando. Go through a planet, blow everything up in your path, and get something at the end that will help you get to the next planet. But there's actually a lot of changes in both the battle system and the structure of the planets themselves. For the battle system, you can now have 3 weapons on your recently used list, which makes this a feature I use a lot more often now. You also have a full other circle you can now put weapons and gadgets on your quick select. The weapons are pretty good for the most part. You got great ones like the Plasma Whip, the Rift Ripper, but then there are some really bad ones. Like the Infecto Bomb. You hit an enemy with it and they try to help you. Keyword, try to. The weapon upgrade system is back as well, but with a big twist. Now you don't upgrade the weapon just once anymore. You now level them all the way up to 5 or 8 if you're in New Game Plus. And with each time they level up, they get a bit more powerful and gain a modifier from Going Commando, like lock-on or shock values. And then they get the full transformation when they hit level 5. So you're gonna be spending a lot more time on each weapon. Now it's actually kind of cool, if you played the previous games, you get some loyalty discounts, let's call them. Okay, so in Ratchet & Clank 1, there was a point where Ratchet & Clank worked for Gadgetron, and the guy said the employee discount doesn't happen for another 2 years. Well, since that was in 2002 and this is 2004, you now get 10% off of all weapons in Ratchet 3 if you have a save file for Ratchet 1. And once again, you can get weapons from the previous game, this case Going Commando, if you have a save file for it, all for free. Though they are spaced out more. You get 2 at the beginning and 1 for each of the last 3 planets. But unlike Going Commando where the past weapons didn't upgrade, the weapons that come from Ratchet 2 here work off of the Ratchet 3 leveling system. So now these fit alongside all the rest of your weapons. These include the mini turret, the lava gun, which the weapon itself doesn't change when it upgrades this time, thank you for that, the plasma coil, the shield barrier, and of course, the bouncer. That's like our greatest hits of Ratchet 2, so I'm definitely happy seeing these back. In terms of gadgets, you have quite a bit. For one, you start with Clank, who has all his upgrades again, thank you, but you also get the charge boots, gravity boots, the hyper shot, which is like a swing shot and dynamo put together, and it also activates automatically when you need it, which is nice, the tear guys, the warp pad, the refractor, and much more. You still can get upgrades for your armor and health like normal, though health upgrades are strictly through leveling up now, so no more hunting for extra boosts along the way. Oh yeah, there's also 2 special types of boxes you can find in levels. ×2 boxes that double the amount bolts you get for a limited amount of time, and then Inferno boxes, which put Ratchet in a fire armor with a powerful wrench and is completely invincible when it's active. Problem is, you can't use any other weapons during it, so I end up avoiding it most of the time, and you're never required to have it, but if you want to use it, have at it. Now, planet structure is a bit different than the past 2 games. For one, you have the starship Phoenix that you keep going back to all the time, and most planets are very linear in design, and it's all about getting to the end, which results in you getting to a new planet or to a war zone. These are small areas where you participate in missions with the Galactic Rangers that you need to complete in order to gain access to a new planet or gadget. The various minigames are back as well, such as the arena known as Annihilation Nation, which might I add, is an amazing name for a game show, and it's even better with more challenges with different effects, obstacles, and some platforming sections here as well. Clank is also back, but he no longer has his extra bots besides the standard ones, but he does get Scrunch the Monkey along with a banana gun. I'm not sure what the connection between monkeys and robots is, but okay. The crystal hunting is also back, but now it's just one area instead of two. There's also the new Quark vid comics that are 5 2D levels where you play as Captain Quark and must simply reach the end. And after a certain amount of progression, you fight bosses again. I'll give them credit, they're not a complete cakewalk like last time, but they're not that great either. Other than this one part in a boss fight where it switches to the boss's point of view, most of the bosses are pretty underwhelming and forgettable, unfortunately. So that's it for Up Your Arsenal. So what are the changes that I liked? So going into this review, I was really wondering how my opinion of the game would change. As you start breaking these games down piece by piece, you start to appreciate or hate things more than just when you were playing games in your spare time. And thankfully, I found a lot to like in Ratchet 3. For one, I love the new battle system. Leveling up weapons now takes much longer, and that's actually a good thing. In Ratchet 2, once a weapon was leveled up, you were most likely not using it again as it couldn't gain any more experience. But now I have time to enjoy them and I won't max them out fast, which is a nice change. New Game Plus did get some sweet additions as well, mainly letting you skip certain events on repeated playthroughs, like the Quark vid comic. Really just for the sake of moving on. And of course, I love being able to level up your weapons to level 8, and oh, the joy you can have of a maxed out weapon is so much fun. Especially the Rhino 3, which is basically if the Rhino 2 and the Zodiac loved each other very much, and where am I going with this? It basically becomes Lasers of Death and a screen nuke. So, yay. And while you may not get as many interactions with different people, dude, Nefarious makes this game with his humor. For how off the wall he is, his freakouts as stated before, and him being a complete fanboy over Secret Agent Clank is a really interesting and funny dynamic for a villain, even if it's short-lived. Speaking of Clank, they did the impossible. They actually made me like the Clank sections. I didn't like them in Ratchet 1, and I felt they were just kind of there in 2. But here, I got a legitimate kick out of them. They made him both faster in his movement and combat. This makes going through his sections feel a lot more closer to playing as Ratchet. The banana gun doesn't add much in my opinion, but the actual level design feels a lot better than before. Especially the part where you get to play an episode of his TV show, that I always try to play as perfect as I can. I gotta look good for the camera after all. And it ends with a giant Clank battle that's pretty much straight out of a monster film. It's such a fun section, and I'm glad to see Clank finally get some care after all this time. I also love all the conveniences that the game makes, such as the improved quick select, the fact that when you go to Gadgetron vendors, you now have the option to fill all your ammo counts with one selection. That saves so much time, it's not even funny. Also, if you put in a certain code, you can get a demo for Sly 2 in the game, which by the way, Sly 2 is pretty amazing. I reviewed that too. You can go watch it right here. You should, because you can. Anyway, if you beat the demo, you can get a skin for your wrench that basically turns it into a Darth Maul lightsaber. It's pretty cool. And I'll say it right now, my absolute favorite improvement from the second game, the new arena. Annihilation Nation is without a doubt my favorite planet of the game. The actual fights feel a lot more engaging now, as the gimmicks for each fight are far more apparent, and not just for the obstacles like last time. But now they bring out a turret to attack you, sleeping gas that makes you have to finish the fight fast, cycling through all your weapons randomly, and of course, that announcer just makes it for me.
Now it's time to get down and dirty for a lowdown showdown.
But I also love the inclusion of platforming challenges as well, that makes this really feel like a game show, and fit perfectly within the main gameplay of Ratchet & Clank. Sadly, this is where the improvements over the last game kind of come to an end. Yeah, sadly, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal has a lot of things that I'm not a fan of. A big part of that is the story. And while this might not be a very popular opinion, but oddly enough, I think a big part of why this story doesn't work for me is Nefarious. Don't get me wrong, I love him as a character and he's without a doubt the most entertaining part of the game for me, but as an actual villain, he's just not intimidating. there's never a moment in the story where I feel the urgency to stop whatever he's doing. Nefarious really doesn't do anything himself to influence the plot, and is more just a face for his army rather than being an actual threat. The doppelganger that appears halfway through the game is a bigger threat than Nefarious himself. That's just kind of sad. And I think a big reason for why he feels weak as an antagonist here is because all of his evil actions are always told, not shown. Unlike in Ratchet 1 and 2, where they clearly show why the villain is a threat and gives you motivation to stop them. A perfect example of this is in Metropolis, where Nefarious plans to make his big move. All we see him do is turn his soldiers into robots. Nothing else. Yet when you head back to the Phoenix, a broadcast shows that the Bio-Obliterator is destroying buildings, leaving destruction everywhere, and people are in a state of panic. Yet we see none of that when we're actually there. You see what I mean? He's just there as a means to be stopped with nothing that makes him that credible of a villain. And considering they keep trying to build him up as this unstoppable force, and all he does is just turn a few people into robots? Okay, why is that so bad? I mean, they can be under the control of Nefarious, but that's only said as a throwaway line, and again, it's not shown. And slight spoiler, but not really, they turned Skid into a robot, but that really doesn't change much in the grand scheme of things, considering Skid does nothing in the story after that point. And this kind of leads into another big reason why I don't care for the story at all. Your teammates are completely useless. They don't do anything to help Ratchet at all, and you really start to question why they're even there. The only one that I ever felt contributed anything was Big Al, who was able to hack Nefarious's different encryptions on his plans. Scrunch really helps only through distraction and Clank levels, but nowhere else. Skid just runs away from danger and uses a hacker at one point that you get as a gadget later. Helga... Actually, does Helga even do anything? Well, I guess she tests you on a hyper shot, but it's a gadget we basically used before, so what's the point? And the Galactic Rangers? They only get themselves into trouble and you have to bail them out every single time. And Sasha, the new love interest in the head of the ship? She really only just relays info to Ratchet and Clank. She's supposed to be this big figure in your forces, but she really has no character to her and she's completely forgettable. With this war going on, this could have been a great opportunity to have these characters get some development and grow together as a team because they're not in their comfort zones anymore. But all they do is stick to the same tropes that their characters had before, and you're the one that ends up doing all the work. To be fair, they do point out the fact that you're the only one doing the work, but they do that so many times to the point where it started to feel like more of a cop-out to me rather than a joke. So when they try and make these big moments where you're supposed to care about your team being in danger, I'm sorry, but I just find myself not caring. I know I've been talking about the story for a while, but if they were going to spend this much time on it, I think they should have paid more attention to detail on the stuff I've been talking about. And trust me, the story is only one of my problems. Remember how I didn't like the Terminator from last time? Well, I found two gadgets that I hate a lot more. One is the Hacker, which is the new hacking minigame that you need to perform. You go through multiple levels of a tube where you need to shoot the red and grab the green. That's it. This is just monotonous and boring. And it's not even a puzzle anymore. And it goes on for way longer than it should have the right to. For instance, here's me clearing a door puzzle in Ratchet 2. Here's me doing one of these sections for Ratchet 3. And that was only one level, and there's still more to go from this door alone. The Tira Guys is also a gadget I feel is completely pointless. All you do with it is press the buttons on screen to talk to Tyrannoids. Nothing else. And it's not like Simon Says where you need to memorize them. No, you just press them and you're good. It's boring and honestly it bogs down the pace. Now true, Ratchet 1 had a very similar thing with the hollow guys, but there all you need to do was just wave at the guard and you were through. So this comes off as an unnecessary step for me. Maybe if you use this gadget for extended periods of time and try to blend in more without getting caught, I would have liked this a lot more, but as it stands, it feels really tacked on. Now remember how I talked about that the planets were much more linear than before? Well, they're a bit too linear. Now Ratchet levels have always had a corridor kind of design to them, but there's always more to explore and do with them, especially with the multiple branching paths that you could go on. But here, every level feels flat in design with nothing to do in them but shoot enemies. Count the amount of times where all you need to do in a level is just walk forward and shoot your way until the end with no platforming at all. It happens a lot. All the levels just start to blend together, and I barely can remember any of these planets that don't have significant plot points. And the game doesn't really encourage you to explore, especially with the game's new big bolts, now known as titanium bolts, which are really lacking in the rewards. In the past, they would allow you to upgrade your weapons or give you weapon mods. Now they give you costume skins, and they're really boring. That's not very exciting, and to be honest, I've never collected all of them just because I always thought the reward was never worth it in my eyes. And because there's no incentive to explore these already closed-in levels, this makes me notice the bland level design even more. And I guess to try and help remedy this, that's where the minigames come in. And other than Clank in the arena, I'm not a fan of any of them. Mainly the Crystal Gathering, the Quark Vid Comics, and the War Zones. I love the crystal hunting from last time, but here, man, it got botched. In Ratchet 2, these were massive sandbox areas, where you could explore the vast area to fight a bunch of enemies and find gems, and it's really easy to navigate through, especially if you have the charge boots. But here, it's just all these small pipes that look exactly the same, so not only do you not have much freedom of movement, but everything here looks the exact same, leading to you getting lost in here when you just want to leave. And like titanium bolts, I never felt compelled to complete this. Next is the Quark Vid Comics, which I didn't remember much of before going back for this review, and after playing them, I remembered why I always skip these. I'm thankful there's some kind of platforming in here, but it's the most basic kind of platforming you can get. And all you have to do for the most part is just attack every second you're not jumping and the level ends. It really feels like padding, but to be fair, it's not that offensive, it's just more dull than anything. At least they're not as big of a problem as the war zones. These are easily my least favorite part of the game. You are given a handful of missions that try to mix things up, but unlike the arena where these effects actually feel like they impact the gameplay, every single mission here becomes kill all the enemies in a flat landscape. Over and over and over. Nothing in these environments change mission to mission, and it gets repetitive really fast. And true, you do get a ship at some points to change things up, but once again, it's just kill all the enemies, with no real new factors to make these different. And unlike the arena where you're only required to do like 2 of these in order to beat the game, you have to complete 3 out of the 5 war zones in order to finish the game, with the game not telling you which ones are required. In fact, a skippable one is Metropolis, which you think would be required considering, you know. And what's worse is that most of them feel really weak story-wise being here. Like Planet Iridia, for example, which doesn't connect to any other planet, and it's just here for the sake of completing another war zone. And after completing it, you get a gadget that's used for one planet and never again. So what's the point in having this? Even the Insomiac Museum feels weaker here. It still has a bunch of taken out content you can mess with, but everything here just looks bland compared to the one in Ratchet 2. And the developers don't even talk anymore about the thing in front of you, and it's just simple text. Honestly, nothing here is too interesting. And finally, I think this game starts to really lose steam by the end of it, and the ending itself feels really anticlimactic, especially since they have a sloppy reason for extending the length of the game by one planet, saying that Nefarious just happens to have another Bio-Obliterator more powerful than the one he had earlier. I hate it when they do that kind of stuff. Well, that sounded a little too familiar to you guys. To be honest, this marathon so far has been really following that of the Sly Marathon. I mean, the first game is great, but not fantastic. Second game is fantastic. Third game, I mean, it's good, but it's just not as enjoyable. Now, to be fair, I think Ratchet 3 is much closer to the quality of Ratchet 1 and 2 than Sly 3 was to Sly 1 and 2, but still, I can't help but feel a little disappointed by this title. Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal feels like a step back in a lot of ways compared to Going Commando, and that was even more apparent thanks to this marathon. Going Commando to me is such a solid game on all fronts with only a few things that bothered me here and there, but it was never anything that held me back from replaying that title. I can't say the same for Up Your Arsenal. While I do love the improvements to stuff like the arena and your weapon management, the lackluster story, repetitive missions, and bland design just make me hesitate each time replaying this game when I think about it. Now don't get me wrong, the game is still a ton of fun, I mean that file should be proof enough. But I can't help but feel a little let down from this, and I never find myself fully enjoying this one, and I think it's the weakest game in the trilogy. But that being said, I think I can still recommend this game to both Ratchet fans and newcomers, if you can't find a copy of Going Commando at all. And who knows, maybe you'll get more enjoyment out of this than me. All the more reason to give it a shot. I forgot how tiring these marathons can be, guys. Well, thankfully, we only have one more game left. So, for the finale of the Ratchet Marathon, we're gonna be looking at Ratchet Deadlocked. Huh. Clank's name is not in the title. What, did he just forget to sign a contract that day or something? Well, I guess we'll find out soon enough, so until then, I'll see you guys later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see the other 2 Ratchet reviews, check the playlist on the left, or if you're new to my channel and want to see my other reviews, check out the playlist on the right. If you want to follow me, check me out on Facebook and Twitter because I update them quite frequently. And if you want to support the show directly, you can go to my Patreon, where all the money from it is put right back into production. By the way, thank you Shy Ranger and Arcana for being my top patrons. Thank you guys, you're awesome. And don't worry, the hardest part of the marathon for me is now over. Deadlocked is going to be a little easier on me. Hopefully. Anyway, I'll see you then.